the return of great power competition, as much as this term is tired in my view, these are things that affect how we live our lives in our countries, especially, and I think we'll talk about this later, the impact it has on our elections, on our democratic system, on our financial systems. These are things that affect us every day because, for example, if you talk about corruption, if there is too much corruption in one country, I might think of this as a very domestic issue, but it is related to security concerns, depending on which actors are involved in it, that create issues for my own country, for my own locality, for my city. So it's about making these connections with what we think as very broad security issues and relating them to our everyday lives.
Rather than also looking just from threats or security issues coming from the outside, another important aspect, I think, is to look at threats from the inside as well. So we have various kinds of social movements rising from within society, populism, and these kind of phenomena can also be exacerbated by outside actors. And they do threaten the very pillars of democracy and the pillars that our societies are built on. And they do not happen just overnight. They don't happen just within a few years, but they can develop over decades. And that's why I also think it's very important for youth to be thinking about these issues, because the decisions that are being made today will have a very long-lasting impact.
I mean, the short answer as to why people should care, or young people should care, is because, as Mariette said, this affects us. This decisions taken now will sort of help shape our futures, and I think
that's a very good question. And in my work, we often joke about, weaponizing everything and the shortcomings of that. I think what I'm trying to say when I say expanding view of security is more on the side of taking into account different groups' concerns when you make security and foreign policy. That doesn't mean everything is a threat and everything is a security issue that should be targeted with security policy tools. I think that's the key, is like not everything is going to be targeted with military means, which is why, for example, here the Defense Department can't do it all. I think what I mean by that is more, if you take a more expansive view, start thinking more about which parts of your policy apparatus can address different pieces that will ultimately improve the sense of security in your population, but that doesn't necessarily mean you used military means.
So my background is in peace and conflict research, so even the nature of conflict itself has changed. It's not country against country anymore. It's much more on like local levels, intra-country wars. So within the countries, we have proxy groups and other ways to influence and impact. And with, for instance, hybrid interference, we see other countries and non-state actors trying to influence in one way or another the society somewhere else. So the means of influence have changed. So it also requires us to redefine or at least discuss a new approach to thinking about security.
The one thing I would say is to listen to criticism, listen to voices from civil society. I was once at a conference at Indiana with the OSCE, and I got shouted at by the OSCE's media representative for freedom of the media for sort of calling out mainstream media for amplifying terrorist narratives. She thought I was being sort of too draconian and wanted to sort of rein in the free press, which wasn't my point, obviously, but still, that criticism was valid, because you need to sort of keep questioning yourself and keep questioning the potential implications and securitization implications that our work might have. So that would be
about. I think a key thing that our generation and the ones after us can do is bring this ability to, let's say, do away with some of the sacred cows of security and foreign policy, things that were taboo before third rail. You can question these things, obviously not with conspiracy theories and saying things like that, but just bring a fresh perspective and say, you might not agree with this, but I think we should be able to question this.
So just because you're young, it doesn't mean that you're not knowledgeable, that you don't know about things. It's just to find an outlet to express the knowledge that you have. And there's plenty of events or volunteering opportunities and other ways to participate. It doesn't always have to be very broad, massive kind of large scale participation, but I think the beauty also lies in these everyday small actions as well. And then together they might create something.
Young people can offer a better and more nuanced view on contemporary challenges. I think, again, like going outside of the EU, but if we look at the US congressional hearings with the tech CEOs that have taken place over the past few years, but especially the recent one, I mean, the line of questioning, you know, it was almost literally, how do I open PDF level of questioning? And, you know, one congressman asked Sundar Pichai why his parents couldn't open his campaign emails. So it's just, again, is it ill-informed? Is it because it's a political sideshow? You know, like, I don't know. But anyway, it wasn't good enough. And I do think that young people would be able to add value to those discussions.
I would say, since you mentioned it's an old man's game, I also want to flip the question. It is an old man's game because older people, this is a broad category, I don't want to call anybody that's too old, do have the luxury to worry about things like foreign policy and security and defense, because there are a lot of things that they don't have to worry about that young people these days are concerned about. Things like not just climate change, but when we talk about improving education, reducing poverty, access to employment, these are things that are very, very front of mind for a lot of young people, which makes it hard for them to really get involved with these issues. And I think the older generations should be worried about how can we involve young people in these issues and geopolitical changes when the prospects are increasingly gloomy.
So for young people, I think it's important to find ways, and I think young people often do find ways to advocate for positive change. But I guess it's up to those in power to A, listen, but also B, include young people in decision-making processes. And I think
something that sounds a little cliche, but I always tell people is don't underestimate the value of serendipity. I moved from Belgium to the US for my master's, was absolutely sure I would go home after 2 years. It's 7 years later and I'm still in the United States. So things happen. Obviously have an idea of broadly what you want to do, but not a very strict plan, because the risks that you'll go outside of it are quite high. And you might miss an opportunity to get into a sphere that you're actually really interested in if you're so focused on one thing. So really look at either pick a type of organization that you'd like to work in, an issue set, and then within those, look at the different places that do that work.
Something that I'm always propagating is to kind of go out of the comfort zone and also maybe work on topics that do not specifically align with exactly what you think that you're interested in, because when you broaden your perspective, you actually start realizing that there are many issues that are interconnected.
And then lastly, like, just don't stress too much about it. You know, people do change careers more frequently now. I think that will be, you know, become the norm in the future as well. So I think that, you know, there's always a chance to switch gears, to turn things around, and to get into new topics. That's certainly what I have done in the past. So I do think that people shouldn't worry too much in that sense either.